And so I will call to order the regular meeting of the Common Council of the City of Platteville. It is Tuesday, November 22nd, 2022. It's 6:03 p.m. and we're in the council chambers for this meeting. Candace, we'll start with roll call.
Todd Casper.
Here.
Barbara Doss.
Here.
Ken Killian.
Here.
Eileen Nichols.
Here.
Kathy Kopp.
Here.
Jason Arts.
Here.
Lynn Parrott. Here.
Okay, tonight we have two public hearings at the beginning of this meeting, and the first is resolution 22-25. It's a street discontinuance, Amar Drive and part of Calhoun Drive. Joe.
Yes, so this is an area of the Golden Heights subdivision. So it was platted back in 1995, but it was never improved. So the streets were never installed, utilities were never installed. So basically the streets just exist on paper. So when it was platted, it was this portion was platted as 10 lots, but the applicant would like to just develop as 4 lots. So the streets, that layout does not work for that development. So the request is to discontinue all of Amar Drive and basically shorten Calhoun Drive. So the shortened Calhoun Drive would provide the legal access to the 4 lots that are proposed, and the rest of it would just become part of the 4 lots in question. So since the lots as originally platted will no longer be needed, they serve no purpose, so they can be discontinued. The Plan Commission considered this item at their November meeting and recommended approval, and staff also recommends approval. Any questions?
Okay, questions of Joe on this? Well, actually, I think the first thing, yeah, after questions of Joe, anybody, otherwise we'll move on to the through the public hearing. And Brian, you do get a talk because you get to make an applicant statement. That's the next thing.
I am Brian Laufenberg at 585 Roundtree Avenue in Platteville. I am the current owner of the property that's being requested for the discontinuance. I guess I don't really have anything to add. Joe pretty much went through the sentiment.
Next on our agenda would be any public statements in favor, and I've had no one register. Then we would have public statements again and against, and again, I've had no one register, and any public statements in general, again, no registration. So now we're to council discussion. Any discussion here? Lynn?
Well, it just becomes his private property. Nobody can just drive on it. I'm just trying to understand.
The way it's done was at the end of this cul-de-sac. It'll be a cul-de-sac, right, at Calhoun?
Correct.
At the end of the cul-de-sac, there'll be 4 lots, and all of them will face on to the cul-de-sac. So nobody will drive through the property anymore because each of the 4 lots will have a space, I guess, a space onto the cul-de-sac.
Yeah,
Is that
and so the part that is discontinued just becomes private property at that point.
Yeah, so it's no longer a road, but there are no easements and there's no underground utilities or anything that the city has put in. So if you went and looked, it would just look like a. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, then I would take a motion to close the public hearing on resolution 22-25 street discontinuance.
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ken and a second by Eileen to close this public hearing. Candace will vote.
Casper.
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Killian.
Yes.
Nichols.
Yes.
Kopp.
Yes.
Arts.
Yes.
Parrott.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, next on the agenda then would be any common council action on this resolution.
I have a motion. Motion to approve the discontinuance of the entirety of Amar Drive and a portion of Calhoun Drive as proposed.
Second. Okay, we have a motion by Todd and a second by Lynn. to adopt this resolution and to allow the street discontinuance as proposed. Candace will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols, Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Next on our public hearing agenda is the 2023 budget hearing. Adam and Nicola, who's doing this?
That's gonna be me. All right, so pretty much this is the 2023 kind of city draft operating budget presentation at the Common Council. So this is really kind of the last step in our budgetary process. So as we've been going through this entire process, we always like to have kind of a goal that we set every year for our budget. So our 2023 city budget goal is our goals can only be achieved through a vehicle of a plan, in which we must fervently believe and upon which we must vigorously act. There is no other route to success. So this is kind of the timeline. So currently where we're really at the last kind of piece of this puzzle here, which is the Tuesday, November 22nd public hearing for the city of Platteville, and then the hopeful council adoption of the budget. So what we're just briefly going to go through here is some kind of the budget basics, the financial outlooks and considerations, talk about the 2023 city budget initiatives, the 2023 city budget increases and decreases, the 2023 capital improvement plan, and then our 2023 versus 2022 budget comparison, and then talk about the 2022 city tax impact review, and then kind of finalize with the 2023 city tax proposed impact. So just some budget basics. Again, the city must create a budget where revenues equal expenditures. So our revenues consist of borrowing, state aid, fees, and taxes. And then our expenditures are obviously our operating expenses, our capital improvement spending, our debt payments, and then any TID shortfalls that we might have. So again, just going over the budget basics, our expenditures, our operating budget, these are the basic costs to run the day-to-day operations. Our CIP are the one-time costs for large capital items. Some items are predictable, others are not. Our debt service is our repayment of loans, which are used to fund expenses, long-lasting capital improvement projects. And then our TID districts are, if our revenues are less than our expenditures, then the shortfall may need to be covered, obviously, by then the general fund. Just going over our operation revenues, some of the things we try to make sure is that one-time revenues should not be used to balance the operating budget. So really, there's kind of two options in regards to balancing our budget. We either have to increase revenues or we have to decrease our expenses. Debt service. Again, the city borrows money to pay for large, long life capital projects such as streets. The length of a loan should not extend beyond the useful life of the item for which the funds were borrowed. Payments on loans represent the city's debt service. And so there are caps in the amount the city can borrow, which exists. So the state has a 5% of equalized value is the statutory requirement that you cannot exceed that in regards to debt. And then as the city, we also have our own policy where we will not go above 3.5% of equalized value. So what you can see here on the chart is in 2022, the equalized value is estimated to be at $852,503,800. So our 5% state borrowing limit is $42.6 million. So that is the amount that the city could borrow and still be within our state borrowing limit. Right now, as of 2022, we have about 19.4 million in principal outstanding. So we are at 45.6% of our debt capacity. Then as the city, we have our own policy. So we actually go a little bit further where we only allow us to borrow 3.5% of our equalized value. So that comes out to about 29.8 million. And so then looking at the same number, the 19.4, we're at about 65% of what we could borrow. So we definitely do have flexibility in both areas. So that's really good. So then just looking at our CIP funding, there's obviously a couple of different funding sources. We can either transfer money from the general fund, which is our extra reserves to cover capital improvement funding. We can carry over from the previous year. We can go out and do short-term borrowings. We can do long-term borrowings then also to cover our capital improvement projects. So again, due to budgetary concerns, the city has about $535,075 that we can spend on predictable CIP items. These items include vehicle replacement, equipment replacement, building repair, park improvements, sidewalk repair. And then in addition, the city has historically borrowed from about $1 to $2 million for street reconstruction annually. Under the current long-range financial plan, the city has limited this borrowing to the amount being retired each year. So in 2022, the anticipated principal paid off for levy support financial borrowing is 1.3 million. So that's kind of our levy limit there that we try to stick to in regards to CIP. Our TIF districts, again, are separate funds that have their own revenue and expenses. So kind of the way to think about this is if you drew a square somewhere in the city and you made that into a TIF district, what that means is everything in that square, then the taxes. So that's the taxes for the city, the county, the technical college, and the school district all go into that square and then are used for projects that happen in the square. So as long as the revenues are not exceeding expenditures, you're basically fine. Everything in that square is good. If for whatever reason you suddenly have expenditures that are exceeding those revenues, that's then where then the general fund has to come in and supplement those costs. So at the end of those TIF districts, that can be on the city. So that's why we definitely want to keep track of all of our TIF districts. All right, so just kind of looking at some of our financial outlooks and considerations. So one of the things we're obviously seeing again is increases in operational expenses due to inflation are expected to outpace our net new construction. It is anticipated that TID number 6 will not require levy support due to projected growth and the approval of the 6-year extension. So that definitely is good news. Our net new construction this year was 0.42%, which unfortunately is lagging a little bit behind some of our municipal peers in our area. We are looking to try to sustain about $537,000 of annual support for CIP, which will require some use of general fund reserves. Our TID and citywide growth and or increases in state funding would obviously help offset some of the above issues that we're seeing. And then one of the things that we're continuing to consider is city funding support for a new fire station will need to be monitored in 2023 and 2024 due to debt service requirements. So obviously in our 2023 city manager budget, there's a lot of budgetary drivers that we looked at. So from operating expenses, that was salaries, benefits, mandates, elections, contracts, revenue. We looked at state aid, hotel tax, revenue related to new development. And then obviously some of the other things we look at are debt service, TID support, and expenditure restraint. So really the key budget initiatives that were put into the 2023 budget was a proposed 5% wage increase for all non-union city staff members, except the city manager position. This was an impact to the budget approximately of $123,000. We then also proposed a Wisconsin Professional Police Association wage increase of 5% to align with compensation plan. That had an impact to the budget of approximately $45,000. We then also are continuing to try to propose step increases for all eligible employees in recognition of honoring 2016 City of Platteville compensation plan. This had an impact to the budget of approximately $14,000. We then have a proposal to contract with Southwest Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission to provide geographical information system mapping services. This has an impact to the budget of about $20,000. We then have some proposed implementations of year one long-term staffing analysis increases for identified staffing positions. The impact to the budget will be absorbed by $65,000 reduction of GIS position becoming contracted, and then increase to museum revenues from store sales and new exhibits. And then we did also put into this budget proposed increases to the expenditure line items impacted by inflation. So we definitely looked at gas, utilities, supplies, and et cetera. So what we try to do here is give you a picture of some of the operating increases that we're seeing that are greater than $10,000 from years past. One of those certainly we are seeing is health insurance increases. As we brought to the council previously, our recommendation is that we would go with the increase that was proposed. And then next year, start looking at potentially some options of how we could reduce that. We've seen, not against any other municipality, we've seen about 2 years of increases that were expected. So now it's kind of the time to start thinking about, okay, do we need to look at alternative plan methods or alternative plans? Those are things that we're going to be looking at. Obviously, then we have the step increases and the increases for employees. That was a very thought out process where we talked to the council, we talked to staff about ensuring that we're continuing to retain the employees that we have and needing to really make sure that we are providing increases that are kind of cutting against the inflationary impacts that we're seeing for our employees. We then had year one staffing plan changes, which kind of fell into that same view, looking at making sure we're incentivizing our employees appropriately and with positions. And then we did see some property and liability insurance increases just due to the current climate that we're seeing with buildings being appraised at higher values. That obviously increases our insurance. We're looking at local room tax contribution. That is increasing, but then we're also seeing an offset there on the revenue side. So that really is kind of a neutral increase. We have some interest on long-term debt, some street equipment, and then the GIS contracted position. So some of the things we looked at particularly were ways that we could decrease some expenditures. So that's the GIS position that we talked about, essentially eliminating that from a full-time position and having that contracted out. That position was unfilled. So that's where we looked at potentially that was an option. The same thing occurred here with an unfilled police officer. We have for a couple of years had that position unfortunately unfilled. So what we would like to do is have that reallocated essentially to the current officers that we have. That does not mean that we're eliminating that position. It just means at this point in time, we're essentially using that money to fund elsewhere. If the need obviously came up where we saw that the service level, we needed police, we'd be coming back to the council and having a different conversation. So that's definitely a question we got in the budgetary hearings that I want to make sure is clear. And then with elections, with not having a gubernatorial election, we're seeing some reductions there that we typically try to put in. Then again, some revenue increases, local room tax, we're definitely seeing an increase there. One of the, if you want to call it a benefit of inflation, is we're seeing interest rates rise, obviously, because of that. So we are anticipating that some of our bank accounts, we're going to see some more money due to that. We have some sale of our street department items and very nice contribution we're anticipating from the county in regards to some additional funding for the library. Then some operational revenue decreases, unfortunately, that we're seeing. Our state aid municipal service payment. So this is one that we continue to kind of bang the drum on. This is a payment that was a calculation that we got for essentially support for the university or having a very large non-taxing entity in the city. This is something that we have continued to see decreases for multiple years, and it does impact our budget. As you can see, we had a $54,000 reduction just to kind of bring some eyesight to that. For every $48,000 roughly that it takes to generate revenue is about a 1% increase in the tax roll. So you can see right there, that is a 1% loss that we just saw due to decreased funding there. We then had general transportation aids is another one. That's one that unfortunately we continue to see, and that is a direct result of the fact that due to the levy limit requirements that we have in borrowing, we unfortunately are trying to be very fiscally responsible in order to borrowing the amount that we paid off the year before. Well, every year we're paying less and less. So what that means then is in tune, we're doing less and less roads. So that then goes back to the obviously the state, and that calculation then means we're getting less and less back in general transportation aid. So as we've talked about in numerous meetings, it's kind of this vicious cycle that continues to obviously play an impact in budgets. So then looking at our CIP, obviously we had a lot of different areas that we looked at trying to fund, and primarily we are using about $100,000 in capital project levy. So that is taxes essentially that is being raised to cover the majority of that. Then it is being split primarily between our general fund reserves, a little bit of our TIF, our wheel tax then is being used to do street repairs and maintenance. And then primarily everything else is being done either through grants and trusts, and then obviously general obligation debt that we are taking out. That's the 1.3 million that we talked about. So these are some of the various projects that we had with general government, police, and DPW. And then kind of rounding out with parks, library, museum, fire, taxi, and airport. So as you can see, we have about $100,000 in capital project levy, about $437,000 of reserves that we're using, $135,000 of TIF, $110,000 of wheel tax, about $7.6 million in grants, with about $7 million of that being directly tied to the new fire station, about $1.3 million in general obligation debt, and then about $72,000 in other funding. As far as our water and sewer projects go, we had about $2.3 million in requests, and due to our water and sewer utilities being very fiscally healthy, we are going to be able to fund all of those projects that were requested. Unfortunately, as we talked about a little bit, just due to kind of the budgetary climate that we're in, there were projects that essentially either had to be delayed or deferred into future years. So we had to make some tough choices kind of as staff and make recommendations to the council. So there was about $792,000 worth of projects that were in the capital improvement plan that we made the recommendation not to fund in order to continue to be fiscally conservative and not have a tax rate that was drastically higher. So just kind of quickly looking at some of the changes that you're seeing here. So this was 2022's total government expenses. As you can see, the biggest area we had here was the general fund, which was about 33% in 2022. Our capital improvement was about 13, water and sewer was 16, and then everything else kind of rounded it out. So as you can see here in 2023, not too much is changing, but you definitely are seeing a big difference in the capital project fund, and that is directly tied to the fire station. That's because there's a $7 million appropriation that is being expected in there. So we're seeing that increase a little bit to 30%. And then the general fund again tends to be about 29% of our expenses. Then just kind of looking at revenues. So again, how we pay for those expenses in 2022, about 46% of our entire budget was made up of intergovernmental revenues and charges. So that is the state shared revenue that we get. That is the general transportation aids, the state municipal aid that we talked about. And then property taxes obviously is the remainder of that, which is 34%. And unfortunately, what you can see when you start looking between 2022 and 2023 is we are shifting a little bit. So in 2022, our intergovernmentals was at 46%. In 2023, we're now at 43%. And then in 2022, our property taxes were 34%, and now we're looking at 36%. So unfortunately, again, without any additional revenue sources, it is putting that burden back onto the taxpayers in order to be able to cover the cost of the day-to-day operations. So just to kind of give you a comparison of where we have been historically against our municipal peers, this is like kind of last year's data. So as you can see, we're at $8.27. This is where a lot of our kind of similar municipalities or populations were. So as you can see here, we're not the highest, we're not the lowest. We're pretty much kind of right there in the middle. And that's pretty much what the majority of this graphical information shows, is that again, through all of the different years that we've been looking at here, going back to about 2016, we've been kind of in the middle as far as where our tax rate is compared to like-sized municipalities of about anywhere between 10 and 20,000. So same thing here again, we basically are the yellow, so you can see we're pretty much smack dab in the middle. So where this rounded out in regards to the 2023 city tax proposed impact is that overall, we're looking at about a 12.8% increase in the general fund. Our taxi bus is decreasing because we're going to be using some of the ARPA reserves or federal reserves that we got specifically that were earmarked for our taxi bus fund. Our debt service is increasing slightly, and then our capital improvement fund is decreasing slightly again, just due to some of the budgetary climate and uncertainty that we're seeing. So what does this mean? Essentially, what is being proposed right now in this budget, if you were to adopt it tonight, is that our 2022 mill rate is $8.27 per $1,000 of assessed value. We are proposing that it will actually drop to $7.24 per $1,000 of assessed value. That's basically about $1.03 per $1,000 of assessed value. The reason it is dropping is primarily due to the 2023 City of Platteville property reevaluation that occurred. So what is happening is the majority of the properties in our city were reevaluated and obviously went up. So their values increased. So what that means is, although there's kind of three scenarios that essentially could occur for a homeowner. Number one is if their property didn't change in value, they will actually see a decrease in their taxes. That probably is not realistic, knowing how the climate is and knowing if you were to put your house up for sale today, you would probably get a lot more than what you've gotten in years past. So realistically, what is probably looked at is we have estimated about a 20% increase in the property value, which in turn will cause an increase in your property tax payment. There obviously then is the potential that if your home was undervalued, that you may see greater than a 20% increase. But to try to kind of put some numbers together so people can see what is happening, we essentially are using about a 20% estimate. So what that does mean for the city is we are seeing a decrease in our assessed tax rate that is going down to historically where we were in about 2011 or 2012, which was about $7.22. So we're seeing almost about a 10 to 13 year decrease in our assessed rate. So then again, overall, what that potentially would mean is if your property was to not change in its assessed value, you will see a drastic decrease in your taxes. But more realistically, you are probably going to see some form of an increase in your taxes just because your home is valued at more. So what this slide shows is an example. If your home was valued at $150,000, a 20% increase would put it at 180. So when you look at the 827 to 724, that means your taxes difference would be about $62 is what you would be looking at, which essentially equates to about $5 a month. So again, then kind of going up the chain, if your home was valued at $300,000 and now would be valued at $360,000, you're essentially looking at about $123 is the increase that you would see in your taxes due to the mill rate. I want to give kudos, obviously, to all of our staff and obviously all of you as council members. This budget and any budget is a very long process. This starts literally back in June of every year, where our directors kind of start looking at and forecasting where they think things are going to go, coming up with initiatives and plans that they have. So I definitely want to give credit to all of our staff for coming up with this budget, and obviously for each of you as council members for asking the questions that you have throughout this entire process. And so now we're kind of at the last stretch.
All right. Questions on resolution 22-26 from council members. We still have the whole public hearing format to go through.
Correct.
I'm wondering if we want to take 22-26 separate from 22-27. We do. Okay. Any questions on 22-26? That's the budget resolution. I guess there's really no applicant. I guess we are the applicant. I've had no one register at all in favor, against, or in general. So we are at council discussion of resolution 22-26, appropriating the necessary funds for the operation and administration of the city of Platteville for the year 2023. Any discussion, any questions? If we have no discussion and no questions, then I guess I would take a motion to close the public hearing on resolution 22-26.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Jason and a second by Ken to close the public hearing. Candace will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, then it's now time for council action. Does anybody have action to propose?
I move to adopt, resolution 22-26, appropriating the necessary funds for the operation and administration of the city of Platteville for the year 2023 in the amount of $24,965,000.
I'll second. Okay, we have a motion by Eileen and a second by Kathy to adopt resolution 22-26. Candace will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Next public hearing. This would be resolution 22-27, authorizing the salaries and rates of pay for employees for the year 2023. Is that you, Adam? Or?
Take it or you
Sure.
take her?
Okay, so as part of the budget, as Adam explained, there was a 5% increase in the base compensation plan for all employees. And there was also a 5% increase in the WPPA union rate as well. This resolution authorizes the rates of pay for all permanent employees, excluding the union and the library personnel and the city manager. Library personnel are overseen by the library board, and the union is negotiated with WPPA. So, but all of the rest of the salaries and wage ranges are included in this resolution and are already reflected in the 2023 budget, which you just passed.
Okay, questions, anyone? Again, I've had nobody register in favor, against, or in general as it relates to resolution 22-27. So if there's no discussion, then I would take a motion to close the public hearing on resolution 22-27.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Jason, second by Ken to close the public hearing on resolution 22-27. Candace will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next, I would take a motion relative to action by the council on this resolution.
So I have a motion I move to adopt resolution 22-27 authorizing the salaries and rates of pay of permanent employees, excluding union and library personnel and the city manager for the year of 2023.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Todd and a second by Lynn to adopt resolution 22-27 as presented. Candace will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, as we leave the budget discussion, I would echo Adam's gratitude to the staff for all they did to bring this budget together. It's never an easy thing, and I probably the worst thing about it is as soon as it's adopted, then you have to start the next one. So
Yep.
it's like the yeah, it's like it just never ends. So, and I believe we adopted this in plenty of time for us to get tax bills out and things now. So very good. And I know we'll have staff that are very busy with that. Okay, let us move on then to the consideration of the consent agenda. The following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature. If you want separate discussion and action, please let me know. We have the council minutes from November 8th, 2022's regular meeting, the payment of bills, appointments to boards and commissions, and tonight I have 2 appointments to the Airport Commission, Bill Closter and Mike Delecky. We have licenses, 1 and 2 year operator licenses to serve and to sell and serve alcohol, and taxi driver license as in your packet, and a banner permit for November 23rd to December 2nd for Wisconsin Badger Camp.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
second,
Okay, we have a motion by Kathy and a second by Eileen to approve the consent agenda. Candace will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next we have citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any. I've had no one register to speak. I would compliment and commend our staff that have been working diligently on putting the wreaths on Main Street, and Shannon, for I think he must have climbed on the roof
Yeah.
to do this. To do, I was a little concerned because I don't want to come and look and see him hanging over the edge or anything, but so compliments. Does any other council member or staff member have any additional? Kathy?
I just like to give a shout out to emergency services, especially the fire department, for the unfortunate call that they had a couple of days ago. But you were there, you were ready, and you did your job. So good for you.
Any other comments? Okay, then let's move on to reports from the boards and commissions and committees. Plan Commission, Todd, do we have anything extra?
Negative, no.
No. Museum, Eileen.
Museum, a couple of events coming up, starting in December, the horse-drawn carriage rides. Please just contact the museum directly. It's a lot of fun. They do it on Friday nights during the month, I think during the 3 weeks in December. Weather permitting or not permitting. Last year, I guess they went in the rain, so you can do it. And the other thing is that February 4th is the Miners Ball, and tickets are already being sold for that. And that's a fun event. You get the big band effect and you get a nice meal and you get to dance with your significant other. So take dance lessons before then if you need to.
Or someone else, huh?
What else?
Whoever you can get to dance with. All right. Then we'll move into the action portion of our agenda. The first item on our action agenda is 5 Bugles Design, presentation of the concept plan for the fire station. And Adam, I believe that's you tonight.
It is. So yeah, at the last council meeting, we had Laura with Five Beagles Design was here and gave the presentation on kind of the concept plan for the fire station. That is included in the packet. So obviously that's in there for any council member, and it's in there for anybody, member of the public who would like to see kind of what's going on there. To summarize kind of what Laura did is she went back to basically pretty much the beginning of all the work that they did, talked about in 2021 when we brought Public Administration Associates and Five Bugles Design in to do the comprehensive fire station analysis and kind of their report. So what that basically did, or what she summarized, was they really looked at 3 kind of locations potentially that were in the area for a fire station. They looked at the current fire station, they looked at the Platteville Armory, and they looked at basically OE Gray Learning Center, and kind of did a pros and cons analysis of all 3 of those sites. And what the synopsis came to was that unfortunately with the current site that the fire station is located at, a new or updated fire station would not be possible to be put on there. So then they kind of looked at the 2 other locations, and primarily with the Platteville Armory, what they determined there is that there would be some issues, obviously, with space, as you would have to go 3 stories up in order for it to be functional. And that already was a concern. There were issues with being able to get in and out with the kind of the property being very long. So what their analysis showed was that OE Gray was kind of the prime location in their kind of recommendation. And then they went through kind of the pros and cons then for the council in regards to whether it made sense to renovate the existing building or whether it made sense essentially to do a full-blown demolition and new property. And essentially that is the recommendation that they made for the council at that presentation, was that due to obviously the building never really being designed to be a fire station or emergency service operation, but then also countering the fact of just the age of the building and a lot of the new requirements in regards to HVAC, electrical, everything else. If you were to try to retrofit the building, it came to basically show a very small portion would be the end result that would be able to be saved or retrofitted. And their cost analysis just showed that that did not seem to make financial sense in their recommendation to the city. So essentially where we are at right now is, as part of our ability in order to receive the $7 million appropriation that we need from USDA, we have to now move into the schematic design phase and start to look at environmental reports and borings and different things like that. And in order to do that, we essentially have to have the council physically adopt or agree to as a vote to move forward with schematic design to occur at OE Gray. So that is essentially what the recommendation has been from staff and from Five Bugles Design, was that we'd be looking for a motion to authorize Five Bugles Design to move forward with the schematic design and the concept plan for the new City of Platteville Fire Station to be located at the former OE Gray Learning Center property.
Okay, questions of Adam?
Now, as far as the actual design, you're talking about location,
Correct.
but you're not talking actually about the design of the structure.
No, so what they're going to move to now is they're going to, this motion now pretty much cements that the fire station is going to be located at OE Gray. What it truly looks like, that's now what they're going to get into in schematic design. So they're going to look at where things can be placed, how it can be done, what the actual footprint will look like. That's essentially what you are giving the green light for Five Bugles Design to do, is to take this concept plan and now put pen to paper and actually make it a schematic design that they come back and show you, okay, your doors are going to be X amount of square feet. This room is going to be this, all of those different, here's the wiring that you're using, here's the concrete that you're using, here's the structures, the whole kit and caboodle, use whatever term you want to use.
And here's
I'm very interested in the energy needs of the whole structure.
Right.
I'm also interested in the idea of a basement.
Yep.
So are those things coming up next time?
Yes. So they will have, when they do the schematic design right now, they are looking at bidding out for a basement.
okay, so the design isn't final. There's kind of a overall general look.
Correct.
The site has been surveyed so that we know that we have the site. We have one person who has registered in favor of this motion, and that's Deb Rice. And we have one person who has requested to speak in favor of this motion, and that's Bill Closter.
Bill Closter, 975 Highbury Circle here in Platteville. I wanted to correct the statement I made the last time I was at this meeting when we were talking about the fire station. I believe that I said that cancer was the leading cause of death among firefighters. That is not true. The statement that I should have made was that cancer deaths among firefighters are higher than the general population, but not the leading cause. And I know what's proposed in the initial design concept is for a what they call a hot zone. It will allow the contaminants that the firefighters get when they're fighting fires, especially in closed areas. They will allow a process for firefighters to go through and rid all those kinds of things from them. Plus, there'll be a system in there to scrub carbon monoxide out of the building. And just as a side antidote, I want my father-in-law was a firefighter in Platteville for over 50 years. And he was found one day in the current fire station laying on the floor when he had been overcome by carbon monoxide. It's just lucky somebody happened to come in there and find him and get him to the hospital in time. And the last thing was he died of cancer. So to sum all this up, I think you know how I feel about this. I just urge that the city move forward with this as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Okay, questions? If not, I would be ready for a motion.
I move to authorize 5 Bugles Design to move forward with the schematic design of the concept plan for the new City of Platteville Fire Station to be located on the former OE Gray Learning Center property.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion by Eileen and a second by Ken to authorize 5 Bugles Design to move forward on the OE Gray learning site. Candace will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The second agenda item that is a action item is the Senior Center City Hall discussion. Adam.
Yeah, so at the last meeting, obviously, we talked about with, before the vote was made, which you just made to obviously move forward with OE Gray, we talked about the potential of, okay, what does that mean, obviously, for some of the tenants that are currently there? And the one we really wanted to focus on was obviously the senior center. The senior center obviously is currently located at OE Gray. With the new, concept plan that has now been moving forward, there is a space that potentially could be used by the senior center. The number one concern that came up, obviously, in talking with the staff in the senior center is that is being designed as a kind of training room, emergency operations center first, and then would be a community room second. So there was concern, obviously, from the senior center staff and obviously from members of the senior center that that wouldn't feel like a place that truly is theirs or has that ability. So we then started to look at potentials of, okay, if that doesn't meet the needs, where within our city then do we have current locations that would make sense? And one of the areas we looked at, obviously, was the former police station that is directly below us, has office spaces in areas that we felt, are they the same size as the current senior center? No. But would they possibly be able to be turned into something that would be a space that definitely could be considered theirs or be utilized by them? Absolutely. So that has been obviously the conversations that have occurred over the last kind of month or so here, was looking at a potential kind of very rough plan that would be done and kind of accommodate where we would be looking at turning kind of the offices that are below here against the wall and making that into a very large space that essentially would meet the, be able to be utilized by the senior center for, their cards, their programming, everything else. Looking at potentially allowing the wall to be opened into the auditorium and give them access to where if they have presenters or potentially would want to use the auditorium, that would be an option as well. And then looking at the front area and kind of some other offices, turning that into an exercise room, craft room, and then obviously the ability for the current staff that we have to utilize that. There is ADA access from kind of all the ways to get in there. So that certainly was something that we wanted to look at as well. And then obviously some of the things that, we are going to have to continue to look at will be parking and then obviously space. That has certainly been something that the staff has had questions about in regards to when you're going from a different space. We're going to have to figure that out if there's programming that, the goal is obviously to continue to have programming for all of our seniors. And if we continue to have great numbers, we're going to have to consider what that means to make sure that we have a space that's truly being utilized and fit. So what we're looking at doing is essentially there is the former sale of the senior center has about $48,000 that is in there. We would be looking for that money to be utilized first to essentially start to upgrade some of the areas downstairs. And then potentially we would be looking at capital improvement requests in the future that then would finish it up. So what the decision, I guess, you have to make as a council tonight would be to authorize city staff to develop a finalized site plan for the city hall swing space to be utilized by the Platteville Senior Center and to allocate the money from the senior center building sales to assist in phase 1 of construction. And that would be the recommendation we would be making as staff to you tonight.
Okay, questions of Adam?
I have one. It's not a question, but I think it needs to be clarified that currently OE Gray, where the senior center space is, also is the Platteville meal site location. And that is not officially part of this, correct?
Right.
That's a separate, I just think it's important for everybody to understand that it's not an automatic that the meal site's going there.
That is correct. So that's a separate contract. And that's something that obviously we have been working with the staff to try to determine is that's one of the concerns that obviously came up is space is, there's no question that I think there's some benefits there, but there's also some cons. So that's something that I think is further going to have to be developed with staff and looking at that and kind of getting the vibe of, what is the temperature in the room and determining if that makes sense to continue to have those two. They're separate, but yet there is some, continuity there. If it makes sense to fully separate that, or if it just makes sense that it doesn't make sense to have that there at all. So.
Okay, other questions?
I have a question.
Ken?
Looking at this map, where is the location of the Housing Authority office?
That is technically where it says Shannon Zone. That's kind of in that area as well. So the Housing Authority is in that spot.
It's in the Shannon Zone?
Technically, it's in the front. Yep. So if you look where it says welcome area, if you go directly across from that, that's technically where the Housing Authority is.
So the Shannon Zone is not completely hidden.
Right. He's very nice in letting other people use his spot.
So,
Well,
and as far as the future, is Housing Authority staying there for some time?
So that's up to obviously you as a council. So right now you're allowing them to use that space unless you say otherwise. The intention would be to keep them there.
Essentially what?
Unless you direct otherwise, right now that's where they're staying.
Okay.
and they're staying as an unpaying tenant.
Correct.
Unpaid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, they're not part of the city.
No, they're not part of the city. That's right. And that's what I said. They're staying as an unpaying or non-paying tenant.
Another question, quick, not to go
Yeah.
back. The meal site, is that a city responsibility or is that a county responsibility?
So that is a county responsibility.
Okay. Wanted to see that.
So it's run through
It's
ARDC,
from
the
the aging
Aging and Resource.
Disability Resource Center.
Yeah, something like that.
I want to make sure I didn't just say it incorrectly.
There's also a preparation area for the city staff as far as council packets and so forth. Is that part of Shannon's too?
No,
What area is that in?
that's upstairs.
The packets that you saw being put together in that one room, Ken, when we took the tour, were actually housing authority packets that were being assembled. They weren't council packets that were being assembled. I think all of the assembly for council takes place up here.
I got the wrong idea from somebody. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I would be looking for a motion.
I move to authorize city staff to develop a finalized site plan for the city hall swing space to be utilized by the Platteville Senior Center and to allocate the money from the senior center building sales to assist in phase 1 of construction.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Kathy and a second by Jason to authorize this swing space to be converted for senior center use. Candace will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and the last action item on our agenda then is to set a public hearing date, set a public hearing on January 10, 2023 for street discontinuance, Jones Street. So Joe,
So I'm sure everybody knows exactly where Jones Street is. Nobody. So there's a street remnant that's located behind basically Steve's Pizza, the Updraft Brewery behind the ticket. The owner of the Steve's Pizza property has submitted a request to have the remaining portion of that street discontinued. So the first step is to set the public hearing, which we're proposing for January 10th, 2023. Then it'll go to the Plan Commission for review and then back to the council for consideration on that date. questions?
so who owns this piece of property?
It's a street right away at this point,
So the city owns it.
correct?
And so is there an alley on this property?
It's adjacent to an alley that runs just north of Hardwick that connects Chestnut Street to Court Street.
But this is not part of the alley, right?
The alley will remain. That's not.
The alley
part of
would
the
remain.
request, correct?
And so if this street is discontinued, then does it become, so it's then not part of the city property anymore?
It would become private property.
It would become private property and then an assessment would be made on that private property. Is that correct?
Yes.
Other questions on this particular, otherwise we're just setting the date for the public hearing.
Correct.
I just have a question about the properties now being worked at next to the alley, which goes next to Hardwick Drug, between what's Chestnut and Court Street. So what is that property going to be?
That's the
Will that property
proposed,
be something in relation to Steve's Pizza?
that's the proposed location for the Updraft Brewery,
Oh, okay.
which is owned by John Patakos, who's the applicant for this request.
Okay, so we're setting a date for a public hearing on January 13th,
January 10th.
January 10th. Is that our next council meeting? Yes.
It's the first council meeting.
First council meeting in not next one, first council meeting in 2023. Can't even believe it. Okay. Do we have a motion to set a public hearing?
Make a motion to approve setting a public hearing for January 10th, 2023 to consider the discontinuance of Jones Street.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Todd, a second by Kathy to move forward with the public hearing on January 10th, 2023 on the discontinuance of Jones Street. Candace will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Motion carries.
So Joe, I just have one procedural question. Why is it that we had to set a public hearing date for this, but we didn't set the public hearing dates for the things we just did?
Actually, yes, actually, for the Amar Drive.
Yeah.
Yes, that first came to the council to set a public hearing and then went back through the process.
We actually, I don't
Yep.
remember doing
Yeah, I
that.
think it was back in October.
Do y'all remember that?
A while ago.
Maybe.
Okay.
That's
All
one
right.
of the steps that we skipped the introduction first, then action. We just took it to action. So it only came before you want.
Oh, okay. I was like, I don't remember that.
We're so budget focused. It just.
Yeah, that just
Right.
kind of slipped on by.
Yep.
Okay. All right, we're done with the action portion of our agenda. Let's move on to information and discussion. The first of which is amendments to chapter 21, the subdivision regulations. Joe.
Yes, this is recommendation is from the staff. It came about basically kind of as a follow-up to other discussions we've been having over the years about changing our ordinances to make it easier or cheaper to develop housing, create additional housing in the community, which was done in response to a couple of housing studies, a housing study that we did, and then one the League of Municipalities conducted. So we did some changes to the zoning ordinance previously, and through a different application, I realized that there was an opportunity in our subdivision ordinance as well to basically simplify the process where land divisions are approved. Essentially, for a certified survey map to be used instead of the preliminary plat, final plat process. So right now, a certified survey map can only be used for up to 2 lots. This would propose that can go up to 4 lots, which is in line with the requirements in state statute. It's what the Granite County uses in their ordinance. It's basically the more common requirement. Our ordinance right now is much more restrictive than the norm. So this proposal would make it easier, cheaper, and quicker for somebody to do a land division. Any questions?
This has been reviewed by the Plan Commission.
Correct. Yes, and they recommended approval.
So in, let's see if I got the right stuff. 2103 definitions, minor subdivisions, you got that. And then you got subdivision. And so in that portion, you cross out 1, 2, 3. The only thing left is that you're going to say where building development, where the act of division creates 5 or more parcels. Is that correct?
Correct. So if it's 4 parcels or less, they can do a certified survey map. If it's larger than 5 or more, they have to do the subdivision.
Okay, so what kind of led me astray was the where. The where, I see you have a little line in there, so it means you're eliminating the where under subdivision, correct? The first sentence, or building development where going down where the act of division creates 5 or more. So you're taking out the colon,
Correct, taking out the colon.
taking out the colon. Right?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Okay, any other questions? If you do have questions, let Joe know. We'll move this to action at our December meeting. Now going on, the next item is contract 10-22A taxi and contract 10-22B bus for 2023 to 2027 service. So Howard.
Yes, thank you. DOT requires request for proposal process every 5 years for our public transportation contracts. Staff put out the taxi contract as 10-22A and the bus contract as 10-22B. Those went on the street on September 28th based on the standard state boilerplate and all, and they were due on November 4th. It's a 2-year contract, fixed price per service hour, and up to 3 one-year extensions, with the contract price increasing in accordance with the CPI, Consumer Price Index. We received 1 proposal each for 10-22A and 22B from our current providers, Running Inc. for the taxi, Russ Stratton buses for the bus service. An evaluation committee has been formed, and they are currently reviewing the proposals for the technical criteria as listed in the RFP, and will be making a formal recommendation. Under the DOT rules, staff cannot disclose the price per hour until the evaluation committee has completed its technical evaluation. That has not happened as of yet. I'm hopeful it will happen tomorrow. Otherwise, early next week. and then we will have the formal recommendation to include the price per hour for the council at our next meeting, our last meeting in December, so that we can hopefully award the contracts starting January 1st.
Okay, so the review committee or the evaluation committee hasn't met, and therefore we cannot see the proposals, right?
We've met, but they have to complete their evaluations. What I did was I met with them. I gave them the proposals and the criteria, and I asked them to do their review and submit to me their evaluations by tomorrow. I have some of them back. I don't have all of them. So I'm hopeful that I will get those back tomorrow. And if that's the case, then I will be able to release the service price.
So how many people are on your evaluation committee? Just a question. It's like you got some and you didn't. Do you have to get all of them? I mean, do you have to get 100%, or do you have to get just a majority, or do you have to get a super majority, or?
We have to have a minimum of 3 in order to have a complete committee. And as of right now, I have 2 evaluations complete and in my hands.
I hear you saying you have to have at least one more.
It's one more, correct.
How many people on the committee?
There's 4 raters and there's 2 ex officio. I'm an ex officio as the lead person, and Katrina Hetchmovich from the university is ex officio as well.
We have 4 and you need 3 for a quorum.
3 for evaluate, you need
3 minimum for the evaluation. I have a student, I have Ms. Shanahan, our senior center director, and I have 2 others from the university.
All right, well,
Some of these are non-voting.
What's that?
They're non-voting, some of them.
no, those 4 are voting. It's
Those-
only,
You got 4, but some of you have additional people and some of those are non-voting.
just Howard and Katrina are the non-voting, right?
Correct,
So you have 6 people altogether, of which 4 can vote.
correct.
Okay. And you have 2 of those 4
So
who have evaluated. So you're waiting for at least 1 more.
That's
Okay, let's then go on to, I don't know how we do this when we haven't seen it, setting taxi and bus fares for 2023.
Yes. It's kind of hard to talk through all of this, but just informing you, the last time we changed fares was January 1st, 2022, only for taxi fares. Staff's proposing a fare increase again. Based on current data through the end of October, cost per ride for the taxi is $11.62. Cost per ride for the bus is $6.14. I am anticipating cost of service to increase. The Wisconsin DOT said that we are to use an estimate of 56.1% for federal and state subsidies for 2023. That leaves the remaining to be split between fare revenues and subsidies from the city and UW Platteville. I'm anticipating a significant increase, which would mean that either the budget that you just approved would need to be amended, or or we would have to cut service, or we would have to increase fares. So, you know, I have proposed recommended fares. Quite frankly, I forgot to bring all the paper copies that I had promised. I do have one here. The yellow on here are the ones that I changed from the original one. I can hand this to someone who wants it or needs it. But what I'm recommending is that, for example, the taxi go from $3 to $5 with decreases for with a discount for seniors, handicapped persons, and children. Fares outside the city limits going up, intermediate stops going up. Agency fares. Agency fares are those agencies who provide services directly to their clients. So we're asking that the full cost of that be placed on that agency budget instead of the local tax dollars. We also have a small package delivery for the taxi, recommending that go up basically to full cost. And then I have the bus recommending that we go from $1 to $2, and the monthly passes go from $25 to $40, and that we also establish an agency fare for the buses. That's a recent thing that has come about, is some of these agencies, in addition to doing taxi fares, they're purchasing bus passes for their clients. So we're recommending that they pull basically the full cost of the service.
Okay, questions of Howard on the proposed 2023 taxi bus fare schedule. In the packet or in the material you received, you have the 2022 comparison, and then actually the proposal that Howard has put out. He's done a cross through of the current amount and put in the suggested, I guess, amount or proposed amount. Questions?
Yeah, I just emailed everybody the updated staff note that Howard alluded to, so you should all have that in your emails.
Okay.
You can see that now with the changes.
Okay. I do have a question if no one else does. Are these increases expected to cover the entire increase in the contract?
It's hard to be specific because when the cost of service goes up, a lot of times the ridership will go down. So it's very hard to predict exactly how much the revenue will increase. We've done this before, and I've seen, you know, the revenue has increased, but the ridership has decreased, and so it's difficult to make a accurate prediction on that.
And the university in the past has contributed 125,000, which was what percentage of the bus contract? Wasn't it 100% of the bus contract?
Actually, it's been more than 100% of the bus contract. They've
Subsidized the taxi.
They've helped
Right.
subsidize the taxi for
Right.
the past few years.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any additional questions? Otherwise, since these contracts expire at the end of December, it means we will have to take action in our December meeting if we're to continue to have a taxi and bus service in this community. Right. And Howard, we're expecting that you'll show us how that new contract and these revenues and any subsidies make that a balance.
My best. Quite honestly, I have to have the DOT budget into the DOT on Friday, December 9th.
So before we have a meeting.
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right, RFP for auditing services. Adam.
Yeah, so this is pretty much just an update for the council members to see where we're at with this. So we had put out an RFP essentially requesting for firms that would be interested in doing the auditing work. Currently, we're using Johnson Block. So we had a deadline for submissions. We issued it on Thursday, October 20th. We had a deadline of Friday, November 11th. We did receive proposals from 4 firms. We have Johnson Block CPA, our current auditors. We had Kerber Rose. Bauman Associates is out of Eau Claire, and then Lauterbach and Amen is actually out of Illinois. So what we're doing is to review the 4 firms and provide a formal recommendation to the Common Council. A subcommittee has been formed consisting of the city manager, the administration director, and the comptroller. We did meet yesterday to kind of go over the proposals. And our intention is over the next 2 weeks to do about 30-minute interviews with each of these firms. And you have kind of a quick snapshot of some of the cost proposals that are in here. And so some of the considerations, obviously, that the subcommittee is going to be making is looking into each of the firm's proposals. And also taking into account some of the kind of non-variables that aren't obviously in cost, and that's with our staff. We still do have a very relatively young staff when it comes to as far as our finance team. So we want to make sure we're taking those considerations into account when we're talking about potentially switching to a different provider. That is obviously something that Administration Director Maurer and myself have talked about, is when you switch to other providers, there are a lot of questions in regards to, some of the templates and everything else that you have to do, which obviously can increase the amount of time that takes for our staff. So those are some, obviously, the questions we're going to be asking each firm, what their familiarity is, obviously, with a lot of our systems that we use. And then our intention is that this will come back as an action item on the 10th, and we'll make a proposal because obviously we have the audit, as crazy as it sounds, coming up here in 2023. So we want to make sure that we have a new contract with the firm. So anything I missed you want to add?
I would just say that the finance team is new, maybe as opposed to young.
Well, yeah.
Not saying casting any aspersions on the age of any of the team, but
Right.
the longest serving member of the finance team is just over 2 years.
Yes.
So that is something that is a significant part of our consideration in this process.
All right, well,
Okay, my question is,
Yeah.
what is the history of each of these firms? I don't see any listing here as far as history.
Yeah. So we
What
can.
what is their history? How good are they?
Sure. So we can definitely, what I will do for you is when we come back, we'll give you kind of a history of, that's one of the questions I'll ask each of the firms. I could probably tell you that, but I'll make sure that they do it just to be fair to all 4 of the firms. So we will have that for you at the next meeting.
Well, I'd like the names of cities that they've covered.
Yep. Yeah. And those will all be obviously in the proposals. So we'll make sure if you want to see a copy of those, I can get you copies of those, Ken, so you can see that, because they all had to send that in the proposal.
okay, that's the end of our information and discussion items. We do have 2 closed sessions tonight. Closed session for Wisconsin statute 1985, parent 1, parent E, deliberating and negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. That's a development agreement. And then a closed session per Wisconsin statute 1985, parent 1, parent C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. This is the 2023 employee compensation / staffing information. I don't expect to take that we will come out of closed session with action.
Right. That's up to you, I guess, as a council.
All right, we might reconvene into open session after discussion. I can't project when that would be. So I would take a motion to go into closed session for these two items.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to go to closed session for these two items we will adjourn out of closed session into open session where we might have action to announce. So if you want to stay around, you can. Or you can leave your number and we can let you know if there was action. And so Candace will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yeah.
Nichols,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Motion carries.